Coming up on 5 Minute News. January 6 panel exposes Trump's 187 minutes of purposeful inaction. Democrats' roll call bill to protect contraception from Supreme Court. And first U.S. polio case found in New York for nearly a decade. It's Friday, July 22. I'm Anthony Davis. Former President Trump sat for hours watching the January 6 attack on the U.S. Capitol unfold live on television, ignoring pleas by his children, lawyers, advisors, and lawmakers to urge his supporters to stop the violence, witnesses told a congressional hearing on Thursday. The House of Representatives Select Committee used its 8th hearing this summer to detail what members said was Trump's failure to act for the 187 minutes between the end of his inflammatory speech at a rally urging supporters to march on the Capitol and the release of a video telling them to go home. Former White House counsel Pat Cipollone was asked question after question in the recorded testimony about whether Trump took this or that action. Did he call the Secretary of Defense? Did he call the U.S. Attorney General? Did he call the head of Homeland Security? Cipollone answered no to each query. The hearing, expected to be the last until September, detailed both the violence that played out as Trump supporters fought their way into the Capitol and Trump's actions in the hours after his speech, in which he urged the crowd to fight like hell, and the release of the video telling the rioters to go home. Representative Adam Kinzinger, a Republican committee member, said Trump had no interest in calling off the rioters. The mob was accomplishing President Trump's purpose, so of course he didn't intervene, Kinzinger said. Donald Trump remains highly popular among Republican voters and continues to flirt with the possibility of running for president again in 2024. But a Reuters Ipsos poll concluded on Thursday found his standing among Republicans has weakened slightly since the hearings began last month. Some 40% of Republicans now say he is at least partially to blame for the riot, up from 33% in a poll conducted 6 weeks ago, just as the congressional hearings were getting underway. The right to use contraceptives would be enshrined in law under a measure that Democrats pushed through the House on Thursday, their latest campaign season response to concerns a conservative Supreme Court that has already erased federal abortion rights could go further. The House's 228 to 195 roll call was largely along party lines and sent the measure to the Senate, where it seemed doomed. The bill is the latest example of Democrats latching onto their own version of culture war battles to appeal to female, progressive, and minority voters by exposing the court and Republicans as extremists intent on obliterating rights taken for granted for years. Democrats said that with the High Court recently overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade decision from 1973, the justices and GOP lawmakers are on track to go even further than banning abortions. In his opinion overturning Roe last month, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that the court should now review other precedents. He mentioned rulings that affirmed the rights of same-sex marriage in 2015, same-sex intimate relationships in 2003, and married couples' use of contraceptives in 1965. Republicans said the bill went too far. They said it would lead to more abortions, which supporters deny, allow the use of drugs not yet fully approved by the FDA, and force healthcare providers to offer contraceptives even if that contradicted their religious beliefs. Every Democrat supported the legislation, while Republicans overwhelmingly opposed it by 195 to 8. The House Democrats' campaign committee quickly jumped on that disparity, with spokesperson Helen Keller saying her party will fight to protect women's freedoms from the GOP's sinister agenda. An unvaccinated young adult from New York recently contracted polio, the first U.S. case in nearly a decade, health officials said on Thursday. Officials said the patient, who lives in Rockland County, had developed paralysis. The person developed symptoms a month ago and did not recently travel outside the country, county health officials said. It appears the patient had a vaccine-derived strain of the virus, perhaps from someone who got a live vaccine, available in other countries but not in the US, and spread it, officials said. The person is no longer deemed contagious, but investigators are trying to figure out how the infection occurred and whether other people were exposed to the virus. Most Americans are vaccinated against polio, but this should serve as a wake-up call to the unvaccinated, said Jennifer Nuzzo, a Brown University pandemic researcher. Polio was once one of the nation's most feared diseases, with annual outbreaks causing thousands of cases of paralysis. The disease mostly affects children. Vaccines became available in 1955, and a national vaccination campaign cut the annual number of US cases to less than 100 in the 1960s and fewer than 10 in the 1970s. In 1979, polio was declared eliminated in the US, meaning there was no longer routine spread. According to the CDC's most recent childhood vaccination data, about 93% of 2-year-olds had received at least 3 doses of the polio vaccine. Polio spreads mostly from person to person through contaminated water. It can infect a person's spinal cord, causing paralysis and possibly permanent disability and death. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.